Dragons, Nords, Imperials, Stormcloaks. What comes to mind when you first think of Skyrim?
Hey, you. Finally awake.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
For many, including myself, it's the all too familiar and iconic opening cutscene. The introduction into the vast and large game that completely sets the tone for the rest of it. It's a cutscene that I think about frequently, and yet haven't really gotten to experience firsthand in years. Finally, Skyrim was on sale for a decent price after being out for over 13 years, so I figured it was time to start my journey through the 5th installment of the Elder Scrolls series. As I did with Morrowind not so long ago, I wanted to play through a bit of the game, doing whatever I wanted, exploring the world, utilizing its features, etc., before actually diving into much of its story and lore. I haven't played Skyrim since 2018, which as of recording this is now 7 years ago, so there are a lot of little occurrences, events, and features that I've since forgotten. So, as to not get too sidetracked and to keep myself on pace, I set a 2-hour playtime limit. 2 hours to get my hands dirty by helping the citizens of the province, fighting a civil war, becoming the harbinger of the companions, defeating Alduin, exploring Solstheim, embodying every single Thalmor agent that I can find. Well, probably won't be able to do all of that, or really any of that in 2 hours, but you get the idea. I'm going to try and keep my thoughts and experiences during this video as organized as possible. But given when and how I've gotten through certain points and tried out different aspects, there may be a lot of jumping back and forth. We'll see how it all plays out. There might be a lot of rambling and opinions thrown in there too, but that's literally what this video is all about. I hope you enjoy it. Of course, the game begins with what is to me the most iconic introduction to any of the Elder Scrolls games.
Funny. When I was a boy, Imperial walls and towers used to make me feel so safe.
Granted, I've only played 3 of the mainstream ones. Right off the bat, as the Imperials are wheeling us rapscallions off to get beheaded, the first thing I noticed was the game's lighting, color, and graphics. It's no secret that Morrowind and Oblivion are charming in their own ways, but unfortunately, due to their age, are lacking a little bit in the graphics department. It's not their fault, of course, and for games that came out in that time period, they look amazing. But I just wasn't used to playing an Elder Scrolls game where everything looked so good. There were so many times during this time period where I was taken aback by the scenes, settings, views, etc., that I just had to stand there for a moment and take it all in. I've only previously played Skyrim on the Xbox One, 360, and PS3, so this felt like a pretty big moment for me. Soon, the boys finally arrived in Helgen, Lokir of Rorikstead got shot down in the street, and I got to pick my character. The character customization menu was pretty much as I remembered it. I think Oblivion had the craziest ability to customize one's character, and I remember being a little disappointed that you couldn't make the same level of abominations as the Elder Scrolls 4 allowed for. However, it does get made up for in my books with the addition of beards. Something of important to note, and perhaps one of the most controversial points for this game, is the absence of class customization, birth signs, major skills, and minor skills. These will be touched on later though. Moving along, the Imperials began calling people forward. Heads were rolling on the floor, and then Alduin the dragon shows up, saving my life. Chaos, mayhem, and insanity break out, and I find myself scrambling through towers, inns, and charred rubble. Seeing as how I've never had the pleasure of playing on PC, for some reason, the controls felt really off and awkward to me at first. The sensitivity was pretty gnarly, and the key bindings were pretty out there. Fixing those, I moved along through the tutorial. The part where Alduin is just above you on the wall as he's breathing fire on the town has always been one of my favorite parts. It demonstrates the destruction and power that these beasts are capable of, their ability to take down cities, keeps, and wreaking havoc on the civilized world. Plus, it really does feel like I'm hiding out from him underneath his wing. Soon, I arrived at the age-old dilemma, to run off with Hadvar or to escape with Ralof. Growing up, I always picked Ralof. I hated the Thalmor and thereby extension the Imperials. Plus, they were just trying to publicly execute me. As time's gone on though, I've learned more about Tamriel's history, the Great War, and watched a ton of video essays and theories. So I think I'm an Imperial fanboy now. But for old time's sake, I went off with Ralof for one last hoorah.
We'll meet again in Sodomgar. Looks like we're the only ones who made it.
It was in the keep that I finally got to the actual gameplay. I got to equip my new armor and swing around my new weapon. Ralof and I fought against the Imperial survivors, and honestly, at first the combat felt a little stiff. There was something about my attack speed with the axe and the range that I needed, and I wasn't really used to it. This of course is a skill issue and my own personal problem, but it got quickly made up for when I snagged the Imperial sword. I love the concept of dual wielding in Skyrim. It's a combat style I so desperately wished was available in Morrowind and Oblivion, so it is really nice to get to experience it again. Ralof and I made our way through the inner workings of Helgen, attacking who we needed to. The two-weapon playstyle felt awesome and very fulfilling. I never really thought of the advantages of dual wielding until playing through this game this time round. I saw a debate online about what's better, two-handed weapons or using two weapons. The consensus seems to be that dual wielding is more worth it, as each item has its own output of damage and attack speed is increased, with the only trade-off being not able to block. I'm curious what your opinion is on it. Looting the potions and taking on the torturer, I was then reintroduced to the game's lock-picking mechanic. I personally love the style and the feature of it, definitely a lot more than that of Oblivion's. I also appreciate that even if the lock is high level, the game will still let you at least attempt it, something they improved upon from the Fallout series. Trying my hand at more combat styles, I went for the classic, spell in one hand and weapon in the other. This was mainly how I did things back in the day, as I'm sure many others did too. Magic is probably one of the biggest changes that was made in this game. They reverted it back to sort of a similar mechanic to Morrowind, where it's something that needs to be equipped and readied, but I've always enjoyed the way it's cast and used in Skyrim. Soon, Ralof and I were out in the caves just outside of Helgen, and together we took on some of my favorite creatures in the elderscrolls, period, frostbite spiders. I don't know why, I've always enjoyed the giant hostile spider trope in fantasy. I think it stems from how modern media portrays them as dangerous creepy crawlers and how they're really just like most other wild animals. They only really harm those who come near their nests. By now, the stiffness of the combat that I was originally feeling had actually gone away, or I had just gotten used to it, and everything felt pretty smooth and flowy. Eventually, we made it out of the caves, and the game hit me with a message I hadn't seen in a long time, enabling survival mode. Survival mode sounds really interesting and fun, and I feel like it's perfect for players who have played this game to death and wanted to experience it in a different light. It's also of course for those who are interested in a challenge. Soon, Alduin flew overhead, and Ralof and I went on our separate ways. The world was officially my oyster, and I could do whatever I wanted. Old habits die hard though, I suppose, as the first thing I did was flock to Embershard Mine. Back in the day, this was always the first place I went to when finishing with the tutorial. I killed the orc bandit outside, and I know this is going to sound very strange, but I was in awe over the graphics of his corpse. The design, lighting, and structure, details, they really took me aback. Again, I've never gotten to experience this game in high def, so there were lots of little things that I noticed this time round. Entering inside of the mine, I switched over to a bow and arrow in order to get the feel for archery. Quite similar to my horrible aim in Oblivion, I completely whiffed my perfect surprise shot at a bandit. However, the two pats did something that I've so long wished was a feature in Oblivion and Morrowind. Their attention was caught by the noise of the arrow, and they ran over to its landing spot. I've always wanted quote-unquote distractions, if you will, to be a thing whilst playing through the previous installments. It makes sneaking and stealth archery a lot more interesting in my eyes. Because of that, it was cool to rediscover this feature after quite some time. Continuing onwards, I kept up with my horrible marksmanship for a bit before switching weapon types. I soon landed on the Iron Greatsword, and from there, the rest was history. Using heavy attacks, I was able to cut down the bandits with ease, and even got to experience the beloved cinematic kill cam. Fighting against the last foe, I attempted to use my Staff of Fury on them for some reason, but I didn't really read what the effects were. It almost cost me my life, and definitely didn't do anything useful in the battle. Once he was killed, I heard the sweet sound of the dungeon clearing jingle. Exiting back out into Skyrim, I decided now was the time to head onwards to the civilized world. I ran across my old friend Sven, who most certainly was not writing awful poetry about a girl. One of the first things I did was approach the blacksmith, Alvor.
Ain't every day we get visitors in Riverwood.
Now, one thing about me and the Elder Scrolls, I'm a sucker for the voice acting. To me, it adds so much to the world, my immersion, the emotions portrayed, the story, etc. Unfortunately, in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, there isn't really much voice acting, and there have been a couple of times because of that I felt a small disconnect with the game. But I will say, the lack of voice acting does come as one of its strengths. With nothing to hold back the dialogue or to limit it, Morrowind offers arguably the most lore and insight into the Elder Scrolls than potentially any of the other games, and that is definitely something that it will hold in its books for a long time. The next thing I did was pop open the beautiful world map. I love how detailed, expansive, and filled it appears. It's always been a pleasure to look at, and I feel as though after completing Oblivion and making my way through a lot of Morrowind, I understand a little more about its borders, small towns, cultures, etc. Moseying on towards the gem of Skyrim, Whiterun, I encountered my first wolf on the road that gave me rock joint. Always a pleasure to run into those little encounters. I couldn't wait for the NPC comments to come raining in.
You look worse than I feel.
Just a bit further along the road, I ran into an Imperial convoy escorting a Stormcloak soldier. Wanting to create some tension and start some beef, I freed Homeboy and the fight broke out. If anything, I more so doomed him because as soon as he was set free, he took all of the aggro and hits. I isolated one of the Imperials and cut him down in the road. Upon doing so, I increased to level 2, and is something I'll come back to in just a second. My Stormcloak friend was mercilessly slain, as expected, and I took it upon myself to avenge him, more so because I had to. I did a good job at weaving and dodging arrows, right until I wasn't doing so good anymore. With my health at just 8 points, I popped open that level up menu and feasted my eyes on one of the features I appreciated the most about this game, the skill tree. When it comes to role-playing as one specific character type for a long time, I tend to have commitment issues. I like to keep things fresh and new, and I enjoy dabbling in the different skills. Why I really like Skyrim is because it feels like it's never too late to start utilizing and learning some of the other skills. Of course, as levels increase, it gets a little trickier to diversify, but for the most part, it's still very possible to do, without having to create a whole new character. Best of all, I'm a big fan of the perk increase feature. I like that you get to pick specifics, choose between different pathways, pump up certain ones, and neglect others. It really is a subjective opinion, and I completely understand if other players prefer how Oblivion and Morrowind dealt with leveling and getting better at certain skills. However, to pick between magicka, health, and stamina isn't necessarily something that I care much for, and if anything, does help with sort of creating a mainstream class. That's something too that I haven't really touched upon yet. Classes, birth signs, major and minor skills, those don't exist in this game. Birth signs have been replaced with standing stones, so I suppose there's that. But major and minor skills, favorite attributes, miscellaneous skills even, none of those technically exist in the game. I'd imagine that's definitely one of the major turnoffs for RPG enjoyers, and something that I also completely understand. Our characters went from those skilled in a couple of trades to all-around gods proficient in just about every skill under the sun. It did take away the player's ability to create a personalized, unique, and custom hero, villain, rogue, ranger, assassin, mage, whatever have you. After coming across the companions and their giant endeavors, I finally came in proximity to the beautiful city of Whiterun.
Halt! City's closed with the dragons about. Official business only. Fine. But we'll be keeping an eye on you.
Entering inside, everything was pretty much just as I remembered it. The NPCs, guards, houses, stores, buildings, foliage, etc. It almost felt like a crazy wave of nostalgia. I wanted to get my hands dirty with helping someone out in the city, so I decided to turn my white knight gaze over to Carlotta Valentia.
Life's hard enough with all these men propositioning me, but that bard is the worst. That bard Mikhail is begging for a dagger up against his throat, the way he goes on about me. I heard him boasting at the Bannered Mare, saying he'll conquer me as a true Nord conquers any harsh beast. Huh. If you want to try, go right ahead. I don't think anything will get through that thick skull of his, though. You've got no idea. Half the men in Whiterun have proposed to me. Some were even single. They'll never understand. No amount of flowers or honeyed words are going to change my mind. Right now, all that matters is my daughter Neela. No man's going to get between me and my little girl.
Puffed up chest, jaw chutted out, and cheeks sucked in, I stomped all the way up to the bannered mare and singled out Mikael.
If it's a lady you're looking for, you best look elsewhere. Once Mikael gets them, they're got.
Of course.
Carlotta put you up to this, didn't she? I'm sorry, but that fiery widow is mine. She just doesn't know it yet. I don't have to take that from you.
I had completely forgotten that brawling was a thing in Skyrim. It's something that occurred often in Morrowind, was pretty much abandoned in Oblivion, and made a reappearance back in this game. I've always loved the concept of brawling. Me and Mikael duked it out, going swing for swing on one another. It really is a pretty cool way to solve little disputes in the game, certainly better than just outright murdering someone, or, on the contrary, not getting to do anything about the issue. Soon, I had bested the Bard.
You know how to throw a punch, I'll give you that. You win. On my honor, Carlotta won't have to worry about me ever again.
With my good deeds done for the day, I returned back to Carlotta.
Ripe fruit and fresh vegetable. Really? You convinced that loot player to stop chasing me? I'd thank the gods, but I'll settle for thanking you. Here's some coin for your help.
I was going to make my way over to Dragon's Reach when all of a sudden, I was hit by a wave of core memories.
Nay, worse than nothing.
Growing up, I would always kill Heimskr as soon as I became Thane of Whiterun. This way, I wouldn't have to hear him scream in the town square, and also, I could use his house free of charge. Showing restraint this time, I arguably did something even worse and began attacking the town guard. It was just for fun, and I wanted to see how long I could stay alive for. Needless to say, I don't even think I lasted for 10 seconds. Back in the day, I loved being a smith. I loved the monotony of gathering materials, supplies, collecting ore, smelting, skinning, hunting, etc. It was, and always will be, one of my most fond memories of this game. The armor types look amazing, and I've always appreciated that by doing a little bit of extra work, you can find a way around purchasing expensive weapons and armor. Plus, more often than not, stores and shops didn't really sell the crazy stuff. Speaking of which, I paid a visit to Belethor and asked him some questions that I never really cared to get the answers for.
Everything's for sale, my friend. Everything. If I had a... Isn't it obvious? Why, the wonderful weather and hospitable people, of course. Not to mention my great fondness for dragons and petty political power struggles. But without a doubt, the most compelling feature of this frozen wasteland is the volley of inane questions leveled at me on a regular basis.
Toned way back from Morrowind, but in my opinion a little more elevated than Oblivion, there's seemingly a lot of different conversational topics and discussions to explore with the NPCs. Within recent times, I've really taken a liking to the little details regarding everybody's background and story. The next thing I wanted to do was work on my enchanting, but not before getting harassed by the Morag Tong.
What's the meaning of this interruption? Jarl Balgrup is not receiving visitors. Well, that explains why the guards let you in. Come on then. The Jarl will want to speak to you personally.
I had forgotten how enchanting works, to be honest, how you needed to disenchant items before you could learn their magical effects. I looked at Farengar's wares and saw that all I could really afford was a ring. As for the disenchanting portion, I had looted a necklace that fortified two-handed weapons for 15%. Breaking that one down, I made a pretty poor trade. I lost that buff in exchange for a 1% buff. It was necessary for leveling and learning the different enchantments, but in that moment, felt like a pretty bad decision. Regardless, I always did like how much overall XP this skill gave the player. Next, I decided to take my adventures outside of the city. Something I used to do back in the day was practice my archery on the giant camp that's west of Whiterun. I was completely ill-prepared though, and didn't realize how fast or strong they actually were. One hit and I was toast, my body getting sent all the way up into the sky. The old feared glitch was getting ejected and tossed by a giant, and I was glad to see that some things never change. Aiming for whatever icons I could see on the compass, my second destination was a bandit camp. Trying out the two-handed warhammer, I liked its damage and the way it swung, but it was pretty slow for my abilities. Obviously, not all bandit camps are built alike, but I did enjoy the look of this one and its overall aesthetic. It felt like it was a previously used mining camp that was taken over by the baddies. Just beyond it was a pit trap that I was destined to get down in. These spike pits are certainly abundant in Cyrodiil's dungeon, so seeing one out in the open for Skyrim was pretty interesting. From the camp, I ventured off towards a mill and came across some poachers. Even though poachers are pretty much just a rebranding of bandits, I could appreciate the added levels and varieties of humanoid enemy types. Plus, in Skyrim, there are more than certainly a lot of different things to poach. This next part is where my mind was officially blown. I entered into the Loreus farm and began speaking with Vantis.
That should be alright. How much space were you planning? Oh, for the love of Mara, what now? Is something wrong? Is something wrong, he asks? Yes, something is bloody well wrong! Or maybe you missed the demented little man in the jester scarf down by the road. Goes by the name of Cicero. Crazy fools asked me to fix his broken wagon wheel 5 times. He won't take no for an answer. Why can't he just leave us alone? Pay me? You think this is about money? Have you seen the man? He's completely out of his head. A jester here in Skyrim? Ain't been a merry man in these parts for 100 years. And he's transporting some giant box. Says it's a coffin, and he's going to bury his mother. Mother, my eye. You could have anything in there. War contraband, weapons, skooma. Ain't no way I'm getting involved in any of that. Well, there is something. There's a guard patrols the road that crazy jester is on. He passes by pretty often. You could report the fool. You know, say he's done something against the law. That will at least get rid of him for me. What do you say? Ha! Wonderful! Like I said, the guard is down by the road. You really can't miss him. You tell him that jester is up to no good and he'll deal with it. Then come back here and I'll toss a few coins your way, yeah?
I had no clue that Cicero could be found this early into the game. Zero clue. I thought he only appeared after a certain point in the Dark Brotherhood questline.
Poor mother. She's been waiting here so long. Stupid farmer and his stupid tools. Why won't he help us?
Finding out that his character can be found pretty much immediately after starting the game was wild and neat.
You need something? Would you now? Well, spit it out. What's the matter? What about him? What? How dare that little fool? And right under my nose! My thanks for bringing this to my attention, citizen. Don't worry, I'll take care of it.
Wandering north, I was excited to see where the world was going to take me. I was quickly humbled by an ice wraith though, as I had forgotten how much damage they had dealt. Deciding to do things a different way, I fast traveled back to Whiterun and took the horse-drawn carriage services, a feature I had never really used much before. However, after abusing the Silt Strider and boat services in Morrowind, I've since gained a pretty big appreciation for this function. Heading to Dawnstar, I arrived in the cold northern town and heard rumors of everybody's nightmares and saw the conflicts of the war firsthand. It got me wanting to dive right into all of the interesting side quests. Wandering around town for a bit, I encountered a pretty interesting occurrence.
Take this and hold on to it. I'll be back for it later. I'll pay you good. Don't lose it. No time to talk. Snitch or double-cross me and I'll kill you. I mean it.
This was something I didn't really remember much of back in 2018.
Did you see someone run past just now? Great. Thanks. Bastard stole from me. I'll catch him though.
I followed the hunter for a bit and watched him track down the fugitive. It got to the point where he was cowering in fear right in front of me, and I had half a mind to finish the job myself. Pulling out my warhammer, I was about to split his head open when all of a sudden, I looked up. The scene was just marvelous. The moon peeking over the landscape, the bay, village, and boat in the foreground, the broken keep way high up in the clouds. It was an absolutely stunning view. Something I haven't talked about yet is the score in Skyrim. In my opinion, the music is among the best that I think I've heard in the Elder Scrolls. One thing I've always felt that Bethesda and Jeremy Soule did right was their tone and approach to each of the province's music. Each soundtrack suited the game that it was tied to and helped to create a more capturing atmosphere. As for the fugitive, in the end though, he took a plunge in the icy waters and I never saw him again. Wanting to talk to some of the folks around town, I tried my luck with Captain Wayfinder.
No offense, but you're not looking so good. By inheritance, as my men are fond of saying. Can't blame them. My mother ran the Sea Squall as strictly as she ran the house. I've been trying to find new areas of business, trying to win the sailors' respect, but I keep having problems. Take the last trade we did. Some fine cut void salts from the College of Winterhold. Plenty of coin if you know who to sell it to. Sailors are what happened to them. They got drunk and ended up losing the merchandise in some cave. If you're not afraid of a little exploring, I'll pay good gold to get those salts.
Thinking it fun to embark on a miscellaneous quest, I saw that Morthal was the closest village to the cave. Fast traveling back to Whiterun and taking a cart over to Morthal, I began walking southwest when I encountered a lone traveler on the road. He had just finished soloing some spiders, and I was curious what he was up to.
I'm on a pilgrimage to the shrine of Azura, the goddess of twilight, if you'll excuse me. In the mountains to the northeast. I'll mark it on your map.
Definitely pretty useful talking to Faldris, and at that, almost every single NPC that you might come across in the wild. The cave was a short distance away from him, and just outside, I faced down some wolves. I saw a dead Khajiit on the ground, as well as a troll skull, so I was a little worried that I'd be walking into an absolute monster's den. Finding the way inside of Brood Cavern, I had a small sigh of relief, as all I had to defeat was a pack of wolves. Searching the highlighted chest, I found the void salts and was free to return back to Wayfinder. Pausing for a second to reflect on everything that's happened so far, I'm really enjoying my time. This game is by no means perfect. There are a bunch of major and minor flaws, as well as directive and artistic changes that many fans believe distance Skyrim from its predecessors. While I agree with certain aspects and disagree with others, fun is certainly a subjective experience. Skyrim still shares a lot of those mature, dark, twisted, shock and awe kind of moments that really capture my attention and frankly is the whole reason this channel exists. I find the stories and atmosphere in Skyrim beautiful, and whilst to some, maybe not as fleshed out and thought-provoking compared to Oblivion and Morrowind, it still has that spark and magical touch that Bethesda used to pour into their games. I haven't really played many of Bethesda's newer games beyond Skyrim, so I don't know how those are and if I would like them or not, but Skyrim still holds a special place in my heart. If you're still with me, let's continue onwards through this 2-hour playthrough as things only continue to get crazier from here. Fast traveling back to Dawnstar, I spoke again with Wayfinder.
No offense, but you're not looking so good. That's the first bit of good news I've had since I set sail a year ago. Here's your cut.
Until next time.
From there, I set my sights on the keep way high up over the village and decided that that's where I wanted to be right now. Ascending up the mountain, I made it to Nightcaller Temple and slew the frostbite spiders that were guarding its exterior. Entering inside, all I had to really deal with were some skeevers. I noticed that there was a shrine of Mara along the wall and used it to finally cure my rock joint, which was a long time coming. On the altar at the front, there were 2 books. One was written by the Thalmor, and it was titled The Talos Mistake, which feels very fitting for the Altmerry Dominion. Below the book was called Lost Legends, and quite interestingly, reading it activated a side quest called Forbidden Legend. For now, I wanted to try and stay away from the interesting and lengthy side quests, really only going through with the smaller miscellaneous tasks. Exiting the keep, I picked a direction and started to walk. There's something about the desolation and cold winds of Skyrim that make it feel all the more cozy for me. I think because maybe it's easier to see any impending threats, and the barren lands lull me into an odd sense of security. I may not be the harbinger of the companions, the Thane of Whiterun, Alduin's Bane, or whatever promises I made in the beginning of this video, but I did come across a patrol of Thalmor agents.
You're interfering with official Thalmor business. Move along. You're interfering with official Thalmor business. I am a Thalmor Justiciar on important business that you are interfering with. We are special envoys of the Altmerry Dominion, the rightful rulers of Tamriel. If you'd like, I can show you why. If you're smart, you'll walk away.
Isolating one of their members, I began my assault on the Altmer and got revenge for the Great War. Back in 2018, I hadn't done any research into the Altmerry Dominion, the Great War, the White Gold Concordat, Talos worship, etc. Having paid my dues and overindulged in various Avardi videos, I know now just how horrible the Thalmor are. So I'll take my chances and any bounties incurred with attacking them. The fights came down to the wire, and a couple of times I found myself needing to pop some health potions. Eventually, I came out on top though and served some justice to the Justiciars. Continuing along the road, I found myself at a strange lodge, which turned out to be the Hall of the Vigilant.
You speak to a Vigilant of Stendarr. Cavort with any Daedra, and we will hunt you down. And any other abominations that prey on mortals. Vampires, werewolves, witches. But the Daedra are the worst. Their callous disregard for our lives is abhorrent in the eyes of the God of Mercy. Yes, our order was founded after the Oblivion Crisis. We dedicate our lives to facing the threat of Daedra wherever they appear.
I had no clue that they had a base of operations and congregated as a unit. I'm fairly certain they're a non-joinable faction in Skyrim, but it would have been really cool if they were. And in fact, doing some research, there are quite a few more joinable and not joinable factions in the game than I had originally thought, so those will definitely be interesting videos to make. From the hall, I wandered westward until I came within proximity to Frostmere Crypt. Just below, I had noticed that there was a battle of some kind going on, and wanted to take a closer look. The bandits present were all low HP, and seemingly fighting against a lone NPC.
Who in Dagon's name are you? Speak, or I'll cut you down where you stand. I was part of the gang in the ruins here. Friend of mine went crazy and stole the boss's sword. They blamed me for it. Look, I'm done here. Mop the floor with these idiots for all I care. Just get out of my way.
Again, a pretty neat sounding side quest, but I really don't want to venture too far into any of the stories just yet. Except for what's to come, but there's a special exception for that one. Soon, Aisa got herself into some more hot water with bandits, and feeling kind of devious, I struck her down with a few cheap shots. I figured this was a very temporary character, and so why not sever the threads of reality for this one. Returning back to Whiterun, my actions against the Thalmor did not go unnoticed.
By order of the Jarl, stop right there. Smart man. Now, come along with us. We'll take any stolen goods, and you'll be free to go.
Petty squabbles aside, I remembered hearing that the barkeep at the Bannered Mare may have been able to offer me some work. Wanting to get more miscellaneous tasks out of the way, I approached and spoke with her.
What can I get you? Here, take a look at this. Some of the Jarl's men came by and left this bounty letter.
Hulda had some good leads for me, and even better yet, it turns out that Halted Stream Camp was actually the bandit hold I had previously invaded, so pretty much half of the baddies should have been cleared. Entering inside of the mines themselves, I took out the guard posted and then moved along further in. Excited to try my hand at the first bandit boss, I snuck up on the crowd in the final room and began my assault. Nailing the bandit chief, he, and along with his other 2 lackeys, came rushing in and absolutely destroyed my character.
Oh well, must have run off.
Trying again, I backtracked to the exit and left the cave, wanting a more open area to fight in. It was here though that I became a little shocked. I had completely forgotten that most enemies don't follow you into different zones within the game. I suppose that was exclusively an Oblivion feature for the most part, as Morrowind has the same function. Going back inside, I managed to get the Orc Chief stuck on one of the routes by the entrance. Through this, I was able to cheese my way to victory via the bow and arrow, and then play cleanup crew on the last remaining bandit. The treasures within were pretty nice for a player just starting out, and there were even a few items that could be disenchanted. Fast traveling back to Dragon's Reach, I approached Proventus Avenici and told him of my deeds.
Right, I serve Jarl Balgruff as steward. Excellent. You've done us a great service. Here is your reward.
Curious, I asked him some questions that I never really cared to hear the answers for.
Splendid. Our fine city has a proud history, and I'm happy to share what I know. The history of Whiterun begins with your Vasker, the Hall of the Companions. For a long time, it was the only building on the mountain. As time passed, a thriving community sprang up around your Vasker, as was common with mead halls. Today, Whiterun is the jewel of Skyrim. I can say without boast that it is the greatest city in all the holds.
As mentioned prior, I feel as though I have a new appreciation for the in-game lore, background, and NPC stories that I've never quite had before. Leaving Whiterun once again, there was one last thing I wanted to do before finishing off with the 2-hour playthrough. Speaking to the escort, Bjorlam, I asked him to take me to the City of Solitude. Arriving, it was seemingly early in the morning or early in the afternoon. To be honest, it was pretty hard to tell, but regardless, the lighting and colors danced from the sky down to the buildings. This was once again one of those moments where I really had to stop and appreciate the HD graphics that PC gaming has blessed me with. Right as I entered into the city, I got to witness the infamous beheading of Rogvir.
By opening that gate for Ulfric, you betrayed the people of Solitude.
He doesn't deserve to speak! There was no murder. Ulfric challenged Thorin. He beat the High King in fair combat.
I've always felt bad for the guy, as there's apparently no one to corroborate his story and absolve him of his quote-unquote treason. Wandering through the capital, I tried my hand at meeting new people and speaking with as many of the NPCs as I could. Along the way came the kooky Dervenin.
You help me. You help people, right? That's what you do. My master has abandoned me, abandoned his people, and nothing I say can change his mind. Now he refuses to even see me. He says I interrupt his vacation. It's been so many years. Won't you please help? Last I saw him, he was visiting a friend in the Blue Palace. But no one as mundane as the Jarl. No, such people are below him. No, he went into the forbidden wing of the palace to speak with an old friend. Said it had been ages since they had last had tea. Oh, and you'll need the hip bone. It's very important. No entering Pelagius's wing without that.
At first, I had no clue what he was on about, and then it all clicked. The hip bone of Pelagius, Dervenin speaking oddly, his master being in a strange place. This was most definitely Sheogorath's Daedric Shrine quest, and you bet there was no way I was going to be doing that right now. However, my real reason for coming here made itself apparent.
I wish only to graduate and enroll with the Legion. My drums will lead our troops to victory. And why wouldn't I be? We sing tales of kings, queens, and their politics, 'tis true. But do you know who really makes history? The person who writes it. I'm a bard, from the Bards College here in Solitude. Wanderers like you should think about applying.
Bards College, one of the few factions I had no clue even existed in the game, and the one I knew I needed to try out for the first time in this 2-hour playthrough. Plus, it just seems pretty fitting. With the clock winding down, I figured there was time to at least embark on the first quest.
Welcome to the Bards College. I'm the headmaster here. How may I help you? Always a pleasure to meet a prospective bard. You should be aware that many apply, but we accept very few people. When possible, we ask applicants to perform tasks the college needs completed. In this case, I do have a task befitting an aspiring bard. Elisif has forbidden the burning of King Olaf, a festival put on by the Bards College. We need to change her mind. To convince her, I want to read King Olaf's verse, a part of the Poetic Edda, the living history of Skyrim. Unfortunately, the verse was lost long ago. Yes, according to Giraud, our history's keeper, the portion of the Edda dealing with King Olaf might still exist in Dead Man's Respite. I need you to retrieve the poem.
Popping open the map, it seemed like Morthal was the go-to town again for my traveling needs.
What's the Jarl going to do about it? How are we supposed to feel safe in our own homes?
Yet again, I ran past some spicy conversations that I so desperately wished I could have been a part of, but for now, eyes on the prize. I had no idea what I expected out of Bards College, maybe tapping a bunch of times at the precise moment, but I certainly didn't expect to be dungeon exploring. Inside, I noticed a ghost staring at me from across the room. Figuring that was part of it all, I went through the motions and picked up the Ruby Dragonclaw. This triggered one of my other favorite enemies in the game to rise from their tombs and begin attacking. I've always enjoyed the idea of the Draugr. I like their concept a little more than zombies and skeletons, with them having a place and story within the province's history. These are ancient warriors and barbarians that once fought for their famed dragon priest and now guard the halls. As the dungeon continued onwards, I followed the spirit, battling against more enemies like the Draugr and frostbite spiders. I even began to take on Restless Draugr at one point, and I forgot all about the challenges those bring to lower level characters. At one point, I was way too confident and overplayed my hand. If there was anything that I learned so far from my experience, it was that destruction magic, particularly frost spells, were my personal bane. Soon, the spirit brought me to a door that was magically sealed. I knew I was going to need to get through there for something, but what was the real question? I battled through more Restless Draugr, swinging away my greatsword, casting spells, popping potions, the usual dungeon crawling drill. Once the fighting seemed like it was done, I descended down a stairwell and finally caught up to the spirit. It was sitting on a rock beside a mummified body, holding the book that Viarmo so desperately wanted. Picking up King Olaf's verse, a lot of the pages seemed raggedy and torn, with some of the words even being smudged. The corpse's nameplate put it as someone named Svaknir, and I figured that was probably the spirit with whom I've been following around. Moreover, he was probably a fellow bard. Thinking that was it and that it was time to leave, Svaknir actually unsealed the magical door. This brought me to the Dragonclaw puzzle, which I had completely forgotten about, and to solve it, the order went wolf, bird, wolf. In the next area, I found Svaknir paused and readied at the base of some altars and pedestals. I knew all too well what this room was for, and I very much looked forward to it.
Olaf, it is time.
Fighting off the Draugr in waves, the spirit and I went swing for swing on them, even being challenged by a few of the restless ones. Once the main floor was taken care of, it was time to move on to the second one.
Arise, Olaf. My vengeance is at hand.
The next four arose from the second platform, and together we took care of those. Finally, Svaknir and I ran up to the third and final level.
Insolent word, die!
King Olaf One-Eye let off a crazy powerful Thume that almost had me beat right away. Popping what potions I had left, I returned to the fight and found myself pretty lucky that Svaknir was taking all of the aggro. If not, this would have been one challenging battle, as I was barely doing any damage. Repeated bashings with my ancient Nord greatsword, and soon, Old One-Eye was laid to rest. The spirit of the bard started jamming out one last time before he disappeared off into the YouTube algorithm. Before leaving, I couldn't help but approach the word wall in the back and absorb its knowledge. I gained one of the whirlwind sprint abilities, which I had no clue was actually here in Dead Man's Respite. I also forgot that you could learn Thumes before learning of your Dragonborn status. I know you can't use them yet, but at least you can completely stockpile them. Officially exiting the dungeon, I fast traveled back to Solitude and brought the Bard's book back to Viarmo.
Ah, you've returned. How goes the task I gave you? I have to admit I didn't think it would actually be there. Now, let's take a look at this. Oh no, this won't do at all. The copy is incomplete. It's aged to the point that parts are unreadable, and the parts that are readable, well, Bardic verse has come a long way since ancient times. It means I can't read it to the court. Without the verse, I won't be able to convince Elisif of the importance of the burning of King Olaf festival. If she isn't convinced of the festival's importance, then she won't reverse her decision to stop the effigy burning. It means that the burning of King Olaf, which the Bards College has held for time immemorial, won't be happening. Make it up? That doesn't seem appropriate. I suppose I could copy his style based on what you brought me, but I have no idea what happened in between these verses.
Really wanting to explore things further, I had to show some restraint and walk away from the questline, but boy oh boy am I excited to see how the rest of that one plays out. With that, the 2-hour playthrough time limit comes to an end. I had a lot of fun doing this video and getting to experience Skyrim again for myself after more than a couple of years. The environment is fresh, the gameplay mechanics are different in some ways and yet the same in a lot of others. The story continues from the beautiful plot arcs we got to go through in Morrowind and Oblivion. The characters and NPCs offer a lot of insight into the universe's lore and history. And above all else, there are strange, spooky, mysterious, and twisted tales that need to be told. Skyrim videos are going to run alongside Morrowind videos, and together I think they're going to create a very wonderful dynamic for storytelling. I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep on adventuring.